In the Karen Reed case, an entire day of court testimony over whether they should qualify a dog bite expert. But there's more.
They spent all day questioning an expert who's already testified. I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
And why is it such an issue that now we're going back and questioning whether or not what this expert said? Why are we even questioning this at all right now?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't think there's a really solid, reasonable, legal or otherwise answer to the question. Dr. Marie Russell is who we are talking about. In Karen Reed's first trial, she testified that the injuries to John O'Keefe's arm were, based on her longtime experience working in an emergency room and as a pathologist, were the result of an animal attack, a dog attack, and that there's no way that those injuries to John O'Keefe's arm were caused by a vehicle backing into him. And that's significant because Dr. Russell qualified in the first trial based on her having been a police officer in the beginning of her career in nowhere else but Malden, Massachusetts. Not that far from Canton, Massachusetts. One's north, the other's south of Boston. Then she went on to medical school, became a doctor. She became a noted forensic pathologist and emergency room physician for years and years and years. And who better to testify on the difference between injuries caused by a dog and injuries caused by a car. And I think as we get into this, you'll see, and I think one of our commenters said even a child could tell the difference. But no, we had to go through an entire day of testimony with Dr. Marie Russell. Do you think it makes any sense to you?
The fact that she was already allowed to go, it's not, the judge hasn't even changed, I guess, is the craziest part to me. It makes sense that the prosecution would not want this to happen because they need anything they can get, but this whole argument just seems a little crazy, especially it's like if we can't even agree on this expert, we can't agree on where these wounds came from. How is the jury going to come to an agreement on a verdict? This case is never going to end.
So this hearing that took place, it's called a voir dire hearing to determine whether the expert is qualified to testify, gave Karen Reed case viewers the first chance to see the attorney, Robert Alessi, the new attorney, in action in this case. And he went through his paces, asking Dr. Marie Russell to explain the process that she used to determine that the marks on John O'Keefe's arm were in fact caused by an animal.
Well, I looked at the appearance of the wounds, and with my training and experience, I took that all into consideration. I did do a differential diagnosis on what those wounds could be. You know, could they be caused by an assault? Could they be caused by a motor vehicle? Could it be caused by, self-inflicted? I went through that whole differential before I came to my conclusion. Those wounds were inflicted by a dog attack.
Do you hold that opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
Okay, so then the next thing that's required in a voir dire hearing is to ask the good doctor, Dr. Marie Russell, what went into the background of her coming to that opinion, or as we attorneys say, what is the basis of that opinion?
Well, I utilized my many years of training experience with wounds in general and dog bites in specific, and went over the materials quite a few times. And with that, and plus read up on some literature that I had read in the past and reread again. And that's how I came to the opinion.
Okay, so now the next question, as the rest of the legal team looked on, was how you distinguished, Dr. Russell, between the injuries to the arm and why it couldn't have been from a vehicle.
What caused you to rule out a motor vehicle accident as a cause of the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's right arm?
There were several reasons I ruled it out very quickly. One is that the wounds were not characteristic of anything that I could attribute to a motor vehicle, a certain part of the motor vehicle, the underneath part of the motor vehicle. They were just not characteristic of any particular part of the motor vehicle. Secondly, there were no bruises from the neck down on his body. There was a mark on the hand, which I think I have an explanation for that.
Please.
Which was not a motor vehicle, but I didn't see any bruises or fractures or other blunt injuries that were characteristic of a person being struck by a motor vehicle.
So now you see why the Commonwealth wants to get her off the stand, because her testimony, in my mind, is very clear. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, she's speaking with more confidence than our vehicles, reconstruction expert saying that it's consistent with. I think she's speaking with a lot of conviction. She's not saying it's consistent with. She's saying, no, it definitely is this. There's nothing on a car that's going to make injuries that look like this, and I don't want to show this picture too much at the risk of getting us demonetized. But something that is really relevant in this case is that those injuries on the arm especially do look like punctures, and they're all up and down the arm. And she has a good point with the bruising. If you're getting hit with this large vehicle, there's going to be some type of large body bruising all over your body. And it's just I'm someone that I walk into everything all the time, and I'm always covered in bruises. I can't imagine being hit by a car.
Okay, so lest you think we weren't going to show our dear viewers the arm, one of the reasons that this hearing went on and on and on is because they actually, Dr. Russell and attorney Robert Alessi, went over the arm injuries inch by inch.
First of all, the overall impression is there's numerous abrasions, and that they have a pattern to them. One can see that many of them are parallel in nature.
Can you use the pointer? I'm not.
Yes.
I wasn't seeing it. Thank you.
Okay. So for instance, the set of wounds closest to the shoulder up here, and these, by the way, are all on the posterior surface of the arm, posterior. And maybe this part is a little bit towards the the lateral portion of the arm. But they all have so they're parallel. They're linear, meaning they look like a line. I believe that the ones closest to the shoulder, the two large linear wounds, were caused by the canine teeth, the upper canine teeth of the dog.
So the thing is here is that, just testifying about it, the jury would not be able to see. The jury, we're visual creatures. We want to see if you hear something on the radio, then, you turn on the TV or you go online, you got to see visually. And, for her to just describe it wouldn't have done it. So, yeah, maybe it's a little bit uneasy to take a look at those pictures, but she, in even more graphic detail, continued and talked about those injuries. And they also, we're not going to show you this, we're not going to show you all the cuts to the sweatshirt, but they went through every single cut in John O'Keefe's sweatshirt. And she said it's obviously not caused by a car. So very thorough, very, very thorough. So that's the motivation for the new special prosecutor wanting to go backwards and get the judge to reverse herself on her previously saying that Dr. Marie Russell was, in my mind, a qualified expert to testify. So it seems kind of crazy they're spending all of this time going over something that she already decided.
It's very unsettling, the fact that, well, there's a lot of parts about it, but it's just unsettling the fact as well that we already had this case, and I think he's making good on what he said, where he wanted to cut out a lot of stuff that was going on in this case. But I guess any good prosecution is going to try to want to not have things that work against them. But in this situation, I don't really think that it would be fair to say that she's not credible. And she even worked at the police department. She has experience. Even just working in a medical setting, you see so many things like this.
Yeah.
There's no reason to question her credibility.
Yeah, obviously somebody that works in the emergency room is going to spend a lot of time seeing. And when Mr. Brennan took the podium, he asked her those questions that you just thought about. Haven't you seen a lot of fractures? Yes. Haven't you seen car accidents? Yes. Haven't you seen dog bites? I think she said she'd seen over 500
I was
dog
going to
bites.
say that's almost daily, I imagine.
Yeah. And 1,000 car accidents, and that kind of thing. So, Hank Brennan, the new special prosecutor, gets up to the podium. He really wants to, nail her, tack by tack to say that she's not qualified. And kind of a bizarre move in my way of thinking. I'm sorry, Hank, but I thought it was very bizarre. These arm injuries are topical. They're the skin. So he tried to nail her down that she's not an orthopedic specialist. And
it's not bone related at all.
A wide array of different types of treatments.
Yes.
Now, you must have seen a number of broken bones when you were in the emergency room caring for different patients, correct?
Thousands.
Arms, legs, toes.
Yes.
In light of your extensive experience in the emergency room, and looking at all of these broken bones, that doesn't make you an expert in orthopedics, does it?
Emergency orthopedics, yes.
So he thought he had a gotcha. Not that it's relevant whether she's an expert in orthopedics or not, but you know what? Irrelevant, but she had a good comeback. It took her a few seconds, but if you're watching a court hearing that goes on for 6 or 7 hours, that was a snap answer.
Well, the couple of seconds are probably to pick her jaw back up from the audacity. It's just sitting looking at these injuries every single day. It's just and you're going to tell me that I don't know what I'm looking at when it's my job to be able to deal with these situations.
Now, her other 3 attorneys were all sitting there. We don't see Elizabeth Little, but she would be off to the left of the screen as we look at it, sitting next to Alan Jackson. But Alan Jackson and David Yannetti, 2 very good attorneys, were sitting there. I would have jumped up and said, objection, relevance. What does an orthopedic physician have to do with this? I mean, any of us who have had, bone injuries know that there are orthopedic physicians, there are orthopedic surgeons. There's a thing called an FACCS. And I don't even know what I'm talking about, but there are different levels of specialty in the orthopedic field. And there are actual experts that deal with hands. There are experts that deal only with shoulders. There are experts that deal only with knees. But what does any of that have to do with a freaking dog bite? So I shouldn't laugh because it's serious.
No, at the end of the day, ultimately, there's no, you're not going to a specialist for dog bites. When somebody gets bit by a dog and it's bad, they go to the emergency room.
Right.
And that's a good point too, where it's just you have the foot specialist and stuff, but when when the S hits the fan, the first thing that they're going to do is go to the emergency room. For long-term healing, that's different, but she is completely right in saying that she's an expert in emergency orthopedics because you're the one that's going to have to deal with that emergency situation.
Speaking of the S hitting the fan, another thing that kicked right back in Mr. Brennan's face was he tried to attack her credibility. It's called impeachment. He tried to attack her credibility based on the fact that, she said she read some articles and she's authored some articles, but you never read a book on dog bites, did you? And he said, you never read a book entitled this, that, or the other. And she said, wait a minute. So wait for it. There's a dun moment here where he has a book that he hadn't done the background work on, and he had to show it to the other attorneys. He shows it to her, and she says, wait, I don't even see that the authors of this book have any kind of degrees.
May I see it?
If the court would
May I see the book?
Yes.
So he was trying to reduce her credibility by talking about a book. She says, "May I see it?" He has to go across the room. There he is. He's showing it to Alessi. Anytime you're in court and you want to show anything to a witness, rule number 1 is that you show the opposing side. That's trial skills 101.
Thank you.
Now she's looking at it. She never saw the book before. So what? There it is. Let me see.
It doesn't mention if any of these people have degrees.
And the whole court erupts, and the court officer has to quiet him down.
Thank you. I don't believe a question
Oh, I'm
is
sorry.
pending for the witness.
Okay, are you moving to strike that?
Yes, I am.
All right, I'll strike that.
So, the funny thing is that an attorney is supposed to jump up and do a motion to strike. If a witness says something that you don't like and you want it taken out of the record, you say motion to strike. He didn't do that. She suggested it to him. Oh, do you want to do a motion to strike, Mr. Brennan? Yeah, okay. All right,
Okay.
I'll strike that. So, I don't know. So, this hearing went on for 6-7 hours. It started late after 9 o'clock. And it concluded at around 4 o'clock, maybe a little bit later. So for the court, that's a full day. No aspersions, because doing court work like this is a burnout thing, and you need shorter days than others, at least in my view. So Mr. Brennan, who we see there continuing, he had only gotten on at about 3 o'clock. I mean, the first 6 hours of this hearing were all Robert Alessi doing really thorough, meticulous questioning of Dr. Russell. So because Mr. Brennan did not have a chance to really do more than about an hour, they're going to come back. There's going to be a second day of this. And this is a hearing that everybody thought was only going to be maybe, an hour, 2 hours, and it went all day. And they're coming back for round 2. So in a way, it's unfair in my mind, because now Hank Brennan has until January 7th. He has a couple of weeks to, get more ammunition. Maybe he can go back on Amazon.com and find some more dog bite books.
He's got to find this next gotcha. Now he's going to be looking through like the credentials of every book. He's at Barnes and Nobles as we speak. He's sitting there with the Starbucks.
Well, you can go on Amazon and get books on all kinds of crazy stuff. I love going on Amazon.com. In the old days, I would go to Barnes & Noble, you mentioned, Border Books, which went out of business. I just like to walk around and look at the books. But now, oh my goodness, like, for example, we talked in a previous episode about Ted Bundy. Should we do another episode on Ted Bundy? And the real authoritative book on Ted Bundy was written by Ann Rule, who knew him personally and wrote the book, The Stranger Beside Me. But you can go on Amazon.com and find a million books. When Mr. Manson passed away, fortunately. I didn't say that, right? I edit that out. I went online and I found a ton of books. I had no idea there were so many books on Manson. And so I actually bought a couple of them. That's how exciting my life is. I go on Amazon.com and I buy more true crime books. But anyhow, so
it's like Andrew with the glass of wine, getting really scandalous at 8 p.m. ordering books.
But my point is that Brennan now has a couple of weeks. I mean, the holidays are there, and I hope he has a nice holiday. I hope, he has kids, so maybe, we'll have Santa Claus come to the house. But, the point is that he now has an additional couple of weeks to do more research to try and nail this expert. So, it really just makes little sense to me. And something else that I wanted to deal with here was that, people are critical. I try to be as objective as I can about this judge. But here's a motion that was filed on the 10th. And what it is it was a motion that was filed by Karen Reed's attorneys, defendant's opposition to the Commonwealth's motion to exclude the testimony of Dr. Marie Russell and request for Daubert-Lanigan hearing. And what the Reed defense was trying to do in here is say that we want to cancel the hearing that's scheduled for December 12th to the extent that it's intended as an evidentiary hearing under Daubert-Lanigan, because the Commonwealth has not made the threshold showing that an evidentiary hearing is required. And this opposition further establishes that no evidentiary hearing is warranted. And it goes on for pages, and they say, look, this has already been adjudicated. The court has already considered whether or not she's an expert. And they said, yes. Well, look at this. This motion it's kind of hard to read, but the date stamp in the court shows that it was filed on December 10th at 11 o'clock in the morning, just before lunchtime. The judge denies it same day. Look at her handwritten endorsement on the bottom, 12/10/24, same day it's filed, denied. The court intends to hold an evidentiary hearing on the Commonwealth's motion to exclude based on Dolbear and Lanigan. And there's the signature. And the thing that's just stands out and strikes me right in the face is that you file a motion in court, the opposing side has the opportunity to chime in and state their thoughts on it. And of course, Mr. Brennan would have opposed this. Of course he would have opposed this, but she allowed this. Usually the courts go home at 4, so she allowed this in 6 hours. She allowed this, in 5 hours without any opposition, giving the other side an opportunity to chime in. So that's wrong. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's not normal to not give the opposition a chance to chime in, right?
It's not only not normal not to give the opposition a chance, but moreover, just that it was denied sua sponte without anything. Just it speaks volumes to me. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out, you think that this is the special prosecutor's last laugh? No, as you pointed out earlier, he wants to get rid of everything that helped the defense in the previous case. He is already starting to take pot shots at the ARCA experts. You remember the ARCA experts? They were the ones that said there was no way that Mr. Brennan, there we go. There it is. The ARCA experts were the ones that were saying that there's no way that John O'Keefe was hit by a car, that he was not subject to a car strike, and that a car strike did not kill him or even hit him. There was no strike between the car and him. So here's Mr. Brennan just kind of raising some smoke. This isn't the actual challenge or a request for a voir dire. What this is the Commonwealth's motion for a reciprocal discovery pertaining to employees of ARCA. The Commonwealth moves pursuant to the criminal rule in the Commonwealth that the defendant produce reciprocal discovery pertaining to employees of ARCA, including but not limited to Daniel Wolf and Andrew Rentschler. They were the ARCA guys as experts potentially called by the defendant. See, he says potentially called by the defendant at her second trial. He's gearing up. So he lists all the stuff that he wants, and we're not going to go over it all. A complete statement of all opinions to be expressed by Daniel Wolf and Andrew Rentschler, all notes, reports, and materials. And yes, this stuff is relatively standard. You can pull the basic language out of a form book and provide a copy of all written requests that have been made by the defense team pursuant to the federal rule, the TUI regulations relative to either expert or ARCA. So this is just the first round. This is the first volley. What's the other vernacular thing? This is the shot across the bow that, yes, he has now challenged Dr. Marie Russell. And what's coming up next is he will be challenging the ARCA experts. So it was a long day in court. It was a really long day, and there are going to be a lot more long days. Did we mention that the motion to continue the trial from January 27th to April 1st has been allowed?
Oh my goodness. I don't think we mentioned that, but I don't know if people can handle that right now, to hear that it's going to get delayed even more.
So I think one of the reasons is that the judge realizes that the Commonwealth needs more time to pick away at the evidence. It just needs more time to pick away at the evidence. A couple of other notes just from watching it. I had clients in and out the day of this hearing, and I had other things I had to do, but I did go home and watch it on YouTube, which is a great thing about YouTube, is that you can, catch up on this stuff was 7 hours. Oh my goodness. But a couple of notes that I had was one of the questions that Hank Brennan had asked was to Dr. Russell, have you ever been certified as an expert in a federal court? What does that have to do with a state court? State courts and federal courts don't like cross citation.
Mhm.
And the other thing that the people that are convinced that Karen Reed is guilty have said about Dr. Russell is that there was no dog DNA on John O'Keefe's arm. You have all those pictures and you claim that it's a dog, but there was no dog DNA on John O'Keefe's arm. Well, guess what? That's because, as Dr. Russell pointed out, the investigators never took a dog swab. They never took a DNA swab from the arm. They did not test that arm that we saw the picture of, and we apologize for showing it. It was disturbing because it is disturbing. The Massachusetts State Police team never swabbed the arm, according to Dr. Russell, and she reviewed everything. There was an extensive line of questioning. Did you review this? Did you review the autopsy report? Yes. Did you review the Massachusetts State Police CERT team result? Yes. So when she was asked that question, how come there was no, dog DNA on John O'Keefe? Because they didn't test it. They were probably too busy looking for Solo cups and Stop and Shop bags to actually do a professional, investigation. But anyhow, I digress.
I can't believe between the leaf blowing and top-notch security for the evidence that they didn't swab for dog bites. With all the other precautions they've taken, you would have thought that they would have at least gone the extra step. But it is concerning. It is I don't know. A lot of people have distrust in the police, and this is not helping. And it doesn't help, like you mentioned before, where it's almost like the judge is kind of nudging the prosecution and kind of helping out. It doesn't really help people reestablish confidence in the justice system.
Well, it's just there's a way to do a professional investigation. And no, I'm not I know there's people out there on YouTube that say, I was a homicide investigator for 45 years and I know everything there is to know. You don't have to be an expert to know that the investigation by the Massachusetts State Police in this case was a botch job. All you have to do is watch and see. And a child that's watched 2 episodes of CSI knows that this investigation was botched. And, we hear a lot of that from our commenters. And, I want to stay as objective as I possibly can. And our commenters, sometimes we read a comment the other day where somebody said, this is the Karen Reed is not guilty channel. No, it's not. We're trying really hard to maintain our objectivity. But talking of our commenters, we have a couple of commenters today. Jay Brimble, 1957, says, hello, it's amazing when certain people put more investigation into plastic ducks appearing all over the place than the M of a police officer. Something just ain't right. Well, that kind of makes the point we were just making, doesn't it?
Yeah, and as far as because that's the thing too, is just the investigation into the plastic ducks. What about the investigation into taking DNA samples from the arm or just having a contained, anything for the evidence at all? It's disappointing.
Yeah.
All right. Our next slide is from STJX70M. If his body temperature was about 80 degrees, I am confused why this was not addressed. How long would have he had to be out in freezing temperatures for that temperature to not be lower? No protective clothing, well over 5 hours in the elements, and was skin damaged for this time frame? Then
that's a good question. I mean, I've had that question. I never brought it up before because I don't see that that's been addressed. I mean, if he was dropped off around or a little bit after midnight to 12:30 in the morning, and then they went back and discovered the body, Jen McCabe and Karen Reed discovered the body at around 6:30 in the morning. If you're out just laying in the snow in the cold, I think your body would be a lot lower than 80 degrees. I don't know. I never said I was a medical expert.
And that's the thing too, where we aren't medical experts. So I know for me personally, my body's at like 98 degrees usually. So I don't know as far as like our blood, like how long things like that stay warm after we're done, or muscles. But that is an interesting point as how much would a body, freeze progressively, especially if it wasn't moving.
Yeah, I think it's a good question to
Mhm.
which we don't have an answer. And our final comment today, BritGal60. I think that Brennan is actually trying to see how he can debunk Dr. Russell's testimony before trial. I don't actually think he is trying to exclude her testimony. He wants a dry run for the trial on how he can make her less credible. If he can do so, or do it now before the jury selection, and maybe sway a few potential jurors, it may give him a leg up. Just a thought. So that's kind of interesting. I hadn't thought of that because, outwardly the motion for voir dire is to exclude him if she doesn't pass. But maybe he just wants a dry run to see if he can, soften her up a little bit, or, kind of figure out his own approach. Figure out, what her weak spots are, and maybe his own approach. Maybe don't mention books that
Yeah,
yourself don't
that's
have
the real
vetted.
test run is like, well, that doesn't make you an expert, does it? Like an emergency bone expert is just like, okay, well, what about this book? It's just like, where are their credentials?
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing is there could be a very solid expert who, has just been doing it for a million years and has testified 1,000 times and, has been in every court in America. But, new books come out all the time. When I'm on Amazon.com looking for that book to read after dinner, there's new books all the time. There was another new one just a couple of weeks ago. Now I forget what it was. There's another true crime book that's just recently come out that I want to read. I mean, there's just so many. There's, so even the most informed, thorough, brilliant person might not have read a book that came out yesterday. So that doesn't discredit them. It really doesn't. They're just, and the same is true of law. I mean, I'll bet I could find a couple of law books that he hasn't read. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, they could come back on me and say, yeah, you graduated from law school 30 years ago. There's books you haven't read. So, I mean, it's so, yeah, I think that's a good point. I
definitely agree with that. I think that I hope that she does her studying too, is all I'm going to say, is that I hope that she comes back in January and she has the most recent up-to-date, look, I've been studying. This is my journal on car crashes and bite wounds. And because it didn't really feel like he did anything to really discredit her. So I'm hoping that it keeps up.
But he gets, as the legal people say, he gets a second bite at the apple. That's a phrase they use in the law. You lose a case and you get to retry it a second time again. It's called a second bite at the apple. So he gets a second bite at this apple in terms of questioning the expert. And so
I was going to say, like, him getting to revisit this in January is like, we have finals presentations. We had some on Friday, and our group didn't go, so now we get to go on Monday. So now we get to fix our presentation of everything everybody else presented that was wrong.
Don't you like that? Don't you love it?
He's probably loving it. He's getting even more time than me. He is probably sitting there he is checking her LinkedIn. He is trying to find her Facebook.
Exactly. Okay, so our final slide is the world is watching, and we have 2 new countries. Actually, I think we have 3, and I forgot the other one, but we have 2 new countries in our world is watching slide. Hong Kong and Italy chimed in this last week. And again, people that haven't seen this before, these are the countries from which we have received actual comments, not just likes or clicks, but people that have actually commented on our specifically episodes on the Karen Reed case, and to the person who said, well, just because they send you a comment doesn't mean they're watching. Well, yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. The whole world is watching this case now. It's gone far beyond Route 128 and 495, and so there they are. Okay, do you have any closing thoughts, Lainey?
No, I do want to say thank you guys so much. We do appreciate you watching to the end, and we hope that this video was educational. I hope you learned something from it. Obviously, form your own opinions. And like we always say, we're not saying that, Karen Reed is innocent or guilty. We're simply just discussing what's happening and the updates in this case. And I do think that today's was an important update because it really gives you kind of an insight on what's going on and how it feels like they're just struggling to get anything they can. It feels like a silly back and forth to be having right now, in my own opinion.
Yeah, my own opinion is that, the woman was allowed to testify in the first trial. It's going to look really bad. There's so many people that, as you said earlier, people have questions about the judicial system. To then, and I know there are reasons for it, but I mean, to turn around and say, oh, yeah, well, this is trial 2.0, and we're not going to just go by what happened in the first trial. Looks pretty shady to me.
It's like, that didn't go well. Let's just get rid of that.
It looks pretty improper to me. It doesn't, I don't think that there's good grounds to reconsider it. And I sense and I fear and I'm worried as my closing thought that the reason that the jointly filed motion to continue from January 27th until April 1st was allowed is because there's things going on in the background that we'll follow and let you know about. But there are things going on in the background along the lines of getting rid of all the defense's good witnesses and bringing in some new ones. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but that's what I think.
Whether you are in the grocery store, the gas station, or anywhere else, please remember to be kind to people. You don't know what they're going through. And the same goes for our comment section. We want you to comment, but be nice, be kind, be positive if you can. And thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Have a good one.